Hi everyone, I just wanted to do a quick tutorial for you about how to create a motion blur effect in Photoshop using the motion blur tool. So I posted this picture on Instagram and I had a lot of questions about how I did it. So I thought I'd show you a quick tutorial. I'm not going to do a full edit on it, but I will do a motion blur technique on a different photo to kind of show you what I did. So this is the photo here that I'm going to edit. So you can see I captured this with a fast shutter speed, 1/1000th of a second. So that froze the motion. I actually had taken a bunch of them slow shutter, and then I took a bunch of her twirling with a faster shutter. So some of them I had the natural motion blur from the slow shutter, and then some of them I went ahead and added my own motion blur. So I'm going to show you how to do that. So I took this picture here into Photoshop. I did some basic edits on it first, and then I took it into Photoshop. So what I like to do first is duplicate my layer. So go Layer, Duplicate Layer, Background Copy. So this is where I'm going to apply the motion blur here. So what I'm going to do is go to Filter, Blur, Motion Blur. So what you can see here, there's a couple things you can play with. So first of all, you have your distance here. So it defaults to this one, but as you can see, the distance kind of controls how much blur is present. So you can make it very blurry all the way down to pretty much no blur at all. So I'm gonna go right about there or so. And then you can look here at the angle, and with the angle, you can actually you can type a number in or you can turn it around. So what you're looking at here is the direction. Here, let me show you you can kind of see like here, the angle of the blur is mimicked here by the angle that you select. So you want it to look realistic. So I'm not going to want to have a completely vertical blur here because that's not the way she was moving. So that wouldn't make sense. So I'm going to have it back kind of pretty much where we started there, kind of in a horizontal direction because that's the way she was moving. There are other blur filters in Photoshop, like a radial blur and things like that. So if you're blurring like a bicycle wheel or a car tire or something like that, those would probably work better for this kind of than the regular motion blur to add blur to those things. So I'm happy with how that looks. So I'm just going to hit OK, and that's going to add blur here. So we can see our original down below. This is our blurred image. So then what I need to do is add a layer mask. So down here, I'm just going to click on this little guy, and that's going to add a layer mask. It's a white layer mask. So if I use a black brush, it will serve as an eraser, and it will erase everywhere that I don't want there to be blur. So as you can see, I added that blur to the entire image. So now my window's blurry, my baseboards are blurry, all that's blurry, and I don't want that to be blurry. So I'm just going to go ahead and erase that off of all that other area. Now the other option you could do is just paint it on where you want it using a white brush and a black layer mask, but this will be good here too. So then you can play around with it artistically how you want it. So for example, if I want it to be like her skirt is twirling, but her head is not, I can kind of erase it off different parts of her. Like say I wanted her hand to be less and just kind of her dress to be blurred. I can kind of erase it off different areas. So now just her skirt looks twirly. It just depends on the look artistically that you want to go for. I'm going to kind of just leave her all blurred here so you can see how that looks. Okay, and then I'm going to go, you can either flatten your image. So I'm going to go Image, Layer, Flatten Image. So that's going to merge those two together. And I'm just going to go File and Save and send that back into Photoshop, or to Lightroom, sorry. And then we can compare the two images. Okay, so let's go ahead and pull up here. So we have our before here, without the motion blur, and then our after here. So in an image like this, what I did was I took, that pop up here a minute. I took a bunch of these pictures of her twirling. I took some of my favorite ones. This one I had her just standing still. So for that one, I didn't apply any blur. So then what I did is I applied a large blur to the whole image. And what I wanted it to look like was that she was progressively twirling a little bit more. So in Photoshop, what you can do is when you apply your layer mask and you're erasing, you can change the opacity. So for the one far over here, on the right, I left a lot of blur. In this one, I did slightly less opacity of blur. And this one, I took out even more of the blur. And this one, I had even less blur. So you can see I had progressively more blur in each image. And then I just added a graduated filter here to kind of darken up that side of the room. So that's kind of how I got that image. So hopefully that all makes sense. Again, this was the before we applied our blur here, and this was the after. So hopefully that all makes sense. If you have any questions, let me know. Thanks.